Malcolm X.
I think a lot of people are confused by the new Arabic name, El Hajj Malik El Shabazz.
I've always had the name on my passport, Malik El Shabazz, only I only used it in the Muslim world. Well, Hajj is a title that is given to any Muslim who makes the pilgrimage to Mecca during the official Hajj season.
Well, will you now use Shabazz and drop X?
I'll probably continue to use Malcolm X and I'll probably use it as long as the situation that produced it exists.
You don't feel that Shabazz takes the place of X?
My going to Mecca and going into the Muslim world, into the African world, and being recognized and accepted as a Muslim and as a brother may solve the problem for me personally. But I personally feel that my personal problem is never solved as long as the problem is not solved for all of our people in this country. So I remain Malcolm X as long as there is a need to protest and struggle and fight against the injustices that our people are involved in this country.
Are you prepared to go into the United Nations at this point and ask that charges be brought against the United States for its treatment of American Negroes?
Oh, yes. Please.
I think you're right in my chair.
The audience will have to be quiet. Yes, as I pointed out when I was during my traveling, that African nations and Asian nations and Latin American nations look very hypocritical when they stand up in the United Nations condemning the racist practices of South Africa and that which is practiced by Portugal and Angola, and saying nothing in the UN about the racist practices that are manifest every day against Negroes in this society. Even in South Africa, those Africans aren't faced with bayonets and aren't faced with police dogs. I would be not a man. If I was in a position to bring it in front of the United Nations and didn't do so, I wouldn't be a man.
Malcolm, do you intend to lead the charge in the United Nations?
Well, I find that to say you're going to lead something creates a lot of hostility, division, jealousy, and envy. I hope to work with any group of leaders or any group of organizations to do whatever is necessary to see that this problem is brought before the United Nations.
Have you had any commitments from any nations in Africa to support you in such a move?
I would rather not say at this time. But one thing I found in my travels, all of them look upon us as their long-lost brother.
You realize the implication is that you have had such commitments when you say...
This is your interpretation of what I said. One thing that I found in all of my travels was that all of the Africans, not only the Africans, but the Asians and the Muslims, look upon us as their long-lost brothers. And America had actually tricked many of them into a hands-off policy by giving them the impression that she was honestly trying to do something to solve the problem. My argument over there was designed to prove that it is impossible for the United States government to solve the race problem. It's impossible.
Malcolm, on your trip abroad, you said you sensed a feeling of great brotherhood and that conceivably you would be working toward integration in this country now. At least this is what you're reported to have said. Have you any comment on it?
I don't think that I ever mentioned anything about working toward integration. They haven't even got integration right here in New York City. You have worse integration problems in the North than they have in the South. So if it doesn't work if you can't bring about integration in New York City as international, cosmopolitan, up-to-date as it's supposed to be, you will never get integration anywhere else in the country.
Are you prepared to work with some of the leaders of the other civil rights organizations?
Certainly. We will work with any groups, organizations, or leaders in any way, as long as it's genuinely designed to get results.
Does your new beard have any religious significance?
No, not particularly, but I do think that you'll find black people in America, as they strive to throw off the shackles of mental colonialism, will also probably reflect an effort to throw off the shackles of cultural colonialism. And they may begin to reflect desires of their own, with standards of their own.
Malcolm, your more controversial remarks was a call for black people to get rifles and form rifle clubs sometime back. Do you still favor that for self-defense?
I don't see why that should be controversial. I think that if white people found themselves the victim of the same kind of brutality that black people in this country face, and they saw that the government was either unwilling or unable to protect them, that the intelligence on the part of the whites would make them get some rifles and shotguns and protect themselves. Now, Negroes are developing some kind of intellectual maturity too, and they can see that having waited upon the government to protect them has been a wait that has been in vain. So any of them who live in areas where the government is not able to do its job, then we do have to get together and do a job of protecting ourselves.
In April 1964, Malcolm traveled to Saudi Arabia. For some time, he had been studying Orthodox Islam. Now he arrived in Jeddah on his way to perform the Hajj, a pilgrimage required of all Muslims. Members of the Saudi royal family helped him gain entry to the holy city of Mecca.
My first impression of him was an eye-opener, because I saw a different person totally. I didn't see the fiery fire breather. I saw a very timid, almost shy man.
When a person performs a Hajj, there are certain rituals through which he has to go. All people have to dress in the same simple way. And as such, you cannot distinguish during the Hajj any people on account of their status, on account of their national origin. It is a demonstration of human brotherhood.
Because everybody was in this white garb, the rich, the poor, the powerful, the weak, the sick, everybody. And they were all intermingled. And I think that had such a profound impact on Malcolm.
Greetings from the holiest and most sacred city on earth. I often think of the warm friendliness of your wonderful family, Brother Malcolm.
Greetings from the ancient land of Arabia. Allah has blessed me to visit the holy city of Mecca, where I witnessed pilgrims of all colors, and all colors is underlined, from all parts of this earth, displaying a spirit of unity and brotherhood like I've never seen before. It is truly a sight to behold. El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, and I guess maybe he thought I wouldn't know who that was, so in parentheses he has Malcolm X.
Malcolm's letters to his followers made news back in America and raised the question, had he changed his position on race?
He does speak of brotherhood, the brotherhood of all races, colors, and so on in the Holy Land.
He says there were tens of thousands of pilgrims from all over the world. They were of all colors, from blue-eyed blondes to black-skinned Africans, but were all participating in the same ritual, displaying a spirit of unity and brotherhood that my experiences in America had led me to believe could never exist between the white and the non-white.
But he has backtracked a little from the position that all white men are devils if he's saying that.
I wouldn't say that he is. I wouldn't say that he is backtracked. One can make an adjustment in one's direction without it being backwards. If when you say that he is backtracked, it seems as though that you imply you would prefer that he call white people devils and not to call them devils, that he's going in the wrong direction.
Nobody likes to be called the devil.
Oh, well, then you wouldn't consider it a backtrack if he stopped calling white people devils, then would you?
After his pilgrimage, Malcolm spent 3 weeks in Africa. On May 21st, 2 days after his 39th birthday, he returned to New York.
Malcolm, have your experiences with white-skinned Muslims in Africa and the Middle East made you feel that relations between Negroes and whites who are not Muslims is any more possible?
When I was on the pilgrimage, I had close contact with Muslims whose skin would in America be classified as white. and with Muslims who themselves would be classified as white in America. But these particular Muslims didn't call themselves white. They looked upon themselves as human beings, as part of the human family, and therefore they looked upon all other segments of the human family as part of that same family. Well, now, they had a different look or a different air or a different attitude than that which is reflected in the attitude of the man in America who calls himself white. So I said that if Islam had done that for them, perhaps if the white man in America would study Islam, perhaps it could do the same thing for him.
Malcolm, are you prepared to go into the United Nations at this point and ask that charges be brought against the United States for its treatment of American Negroes?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, please. I think you're right in my chairman. The audience will have to be quiet. Yes, as I pointed out when I was doing my traveling, that nations look, African nations and Asian nations and Latin American nations look very hypocritical when they stand up in the United Nations condemning the racist practices of South Africa and that which is practiced by Portugal and Angola, and saying nothing in the UN about the racist practices that are manifest every day against Negroes in this society.
As media attention increasingly focused on Malcolm, the Nation of Islam stepped up its attacks and filed eviction papers to force him from his home.
Malcolm in the spring and early summer of 1964 was in a desperate situation with the Nation of Islam, and the one weapon he had left was his knowledge of the messenger's indiscretions with various women who were working for him as secretaries. He called one guy at the New York Herald Tribune and tried to interest him in the story. It was considered libelous, so they wouldn't do it.
When Malcolm appeared in court to challenge the eviction proceedings, he used the trial to reveal the private affairs of Elijah Muhammad.
Why are they threatening your life?
Well, primarily because they're afraid that I will tell the real reason that I'm out of the black Muslim movement, which I never told. I kept to myself. But the real reason is that Elijah Muhammad, the head of the movement, is the father of 8 children by 6 different teenage girls, 6 different teenage girls who were his private personal secretaries.
That was the serious thing, most serious thing, and to charge Honorable Elijah Muhammad with such would be really to take your own life and take your life in your own hands. You know, you would be risking your life. I'm just being plain. I'm being open and plain with you. It would really mean that somebody might kill you in the Nation of Islam.
Are you not, perhaps, afraid of what might happen to you as a result of making these revelations?
Oh, yes. I probably am a dead man already.
What do you mean?
Well, when you understand the makeup of the Muslim movement and the psychology of the Muslim movement, as long as I myself, by having confidence in the leader of the Muslim movement, if someone came to me and I had no knowledge whatsoever of what had taken place, and they told me what I'm saying, I would kill them myself. The only thing that would prevent me from killing someone who made a statement like this, they would have to be able to let me know that it's true. Now, if anyone had come to me other than Mr. Muhammad's son, I never would have believed it, even enough to look into it. But I had been around him so closely, I had seen indications of the reality of it, but my religious sincerity made me block it out of my mind.
At the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, Malcolm announced the formation of a political group modeled after the Organization of African Unity overseas.
Assalamu alaikum.
Brother Malcolm formed the Organization of Afro-American Unity for those of us who were interested in his political, economic, and cultural programs. I think he was aware that there were people out there, you know, from his travels around, that there were people out there who wanted to work with him, but who were not prepared to become Muslims in order
In July 1964, Malcolm was invited to join heads of state from Africa and the Middle East at the Organization of African Unity Conference in Cairo, Egypt.
Malcolm X saw no contradiction between the African fight and the Black American fight in the United States. He thought one was an extension of the other. He can draw support from one to enhance the other.
In the 1960s, Africans had a lot of misgivings about American foreign policy in Africa, because unfortunately at that time, the American foreign policy was supportive of the colonial policies of countries like Belgium. And the only voice which was echoing the aspiration of the Africans in the United States was that of Malcolm.
And there were many Americans who came, but none, without exception, who had the impact that Malcolm had. The man of a message. And the message was not to America only.
Malcolm, what is your purpose here?
Well, my purpose here is to remind the African heads of state that there are 22 million of us in America who are also of African descent, and to remind them also that we are the victims of America's colonialism or American imperialism, and that our problem is not an American problem, it's a human problem. It's not a Negro problem, it's a problem of humanity. It's not a problem of civil rights, but a problem of human rights.
Malcolm traveled to 14 African nations and met with 11 heads of state. U.S. intelligence agencies followed him from country to country. In Nigeria, he was given the name Omawale, the sun returns.
When my father was abroad, we had a world map on the living room wall. And anytime you got a little lonesome and wondered where Daddy was, we'd run over to that map. And where is he now? And he's in Cairo, which is the capital of Egypt. And he's over here with Nkrumah, and he's over. So there was a different kind of passage that we maintained when he was abroad.
Malcolm returned in late November 1964. He resumed the weekly OAAU rallies at the Audubon Ballroom and continued his collaboration with Alex Haley on his autobiography.
He said, you know, I'm writing this book and I don't really know about doing this book. He had some problems with the family having to be subjected to the things that he would say. I'd say, Malcolm, you know what? None of us are going to ever amount to anything until we get our mother out of Kalamazoo. It had preyed on my mind for years, and I didn't talk about it, but it was eating away. And he looked at me like, I'm glad you said that, because it's been bothering me too. And he said, Bonnie, promise, I'll do something. And the next thing, Malcolm never got back to me. The next thing I knew, I got a call. My mother was in Lansing at my brother Filbert's.
And he later told me that it had been pent up in him all these years. He didn't want to think about it. He certainly didn't want to talk about it because he did not feel good about it. But he felt so great when he and his brother came together to have their mother released.
In December 1964, Malcolm debated at the Oxford Union in England.
I read once, passingly, about a man named Shakespeare. I only read about him passingly, but I remember one thing he wrote that kind of moved me. He put it in the mouth of Hamlet, I think it was, who said, to be or not to be. He was in doubt about something. Whether it was nobler in the mind of man to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, moderation, or to take up arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing, end them. And I go for that. If you take up arms, you'll end it. But if you sit around and wait for the one who's in power to make up his mind that he should end it, you'll be waiting.
Malcolm was always involved somewhere in the struggle. And I remember in January of 1965, Juanita Poitier set up a meeting at her house for the regular civil rights leaders to meet with Malcolm X, to work out the differences between us so we could come from that meeting with a common platform. Once again, A. Philip Randolph was there, Whitney Young was there, Dorothy Height was there, Malcolm X was there, several others were there. Martin Luther King couldn't make it, but he sent a representative. And we spent that day discussing Malcolm's philosophy, the mistakes he made, what he wanted to do now, and how he could get on board the people's struggle that was taking place.
In his effort to support a Black United Front, Malcolm accepted an invitation from SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, to speak in Selma, Alabama. It was the first time he had traveled south to work with the civil rights movement.
And I think that the people in this part of the world would do well to listen to Dr. Martin Luther King and give him what he's asking for and give it to him fast before some other factions come along and try to do it another way.
The next week, Malcolm was denied entry into France on the grounds that his presence would disturb public order. By this time, Malcolm began to believe that the forces arrayed against him were bigger than the Nation of Islam. But he maintained his relentless pace.
Whenever I saw my father out publicly, from a child's perspective, at an airport, it was an invasion. You're going to pick up Daddy from the airport, and there's a slew of photographers and other people, and you haven't seen him in 2-3 weeks, and all you want is that hug. I was certainly privy to the fact that we were being stalked as a family, that the atmosphere surrounding the house, the cars that would be parked, faces that were familiar to me once upon a time. Their attitudes had changed.
The night Malcolm returned from Europe, his family's home was firebombed. Asleep in the house were Malcolm, his pregnant wife, his 4 children. They escaped unharmed.
And this was probably the thing that surfacely upset him most, because this got underneath the image of Malcolm, the fearsome, the indomitable Malcolm X. This got to the father and the husband of Sister Betty and their daughters.
Well, he has told me in the past that he has been having some harassment. Could you give us an idea of some of the things that have happened?
Well, in July, when I was in the hospital having my last baby, my 3 small daughters saw my husband almost killed across the street. And
how was he almost killed?
Well, he was in his car, and some men were rushing to the side of his car on both sides of it, and he managed to get away.
Had you had any threats, anything like this?
Had any threats? That's all I get is threats. I get not less than 6 or 7 threatening phone calls every day.
I was surprised to hear that the house had been bombed, but I was not surprised to know that it had been done by Muslims, because I know that's the way they fight. I know that, be that the case, it could not have happened without Yusuf Shah. Could not have happened. It could not have happened except by the Muslims that are there in New York.
The Nation of Islam accused Malcolm of setting fire to his own home rather than vacating as ordered by the court. Later that day, the nation's representative, Captain Joseph, inspected the scene.
Who bombed his house?
I don't know. All we know, it just got on fire.
Does Malcolm know who bombed his house?
I don't know. He never said. And if he did, you know, he should have brought him to justice.
There were news reports of threats against his life. Is his life really in danger?
Maybe it was. He said it was. He said it was.
Do you feel now that there was a climate within the nation itself that put his life in danger?
Well, as you know, in a nation, you have all kinds of people. And they have different thoughts. You have sympathizers. They have different thoughts. You know? And you have people that not even attached to the community. That likes what they hear, but you just can't live the life. Anything might happen. That scare you. So anything could happen. The atmosphere was there. What was being said was there. You see? You got to understand, you know, Mr. Muhammad and what he represented. That's what the people don't understand.
I wanted you to know that my house was bombed. It was bombed by the Black Muslim movement upon the orders of Elijah Muhammad. Now, they had come around, they had planned to do it from the front and the back so that I couldn't get out. And the fire hit the window, and it woke up my second oldest baby. But the fire burned on the outside of the house. But had that one gone through that window, it would have fallen on a 6-year-old girl, a 4-year-old girl, and a 2-year-old girl. And I'm going to tell you, if it had done it, I'd taken my rifle and gone after anybody in sight. I would not wait. And I say that because of this. The police know the criminal operation of the Black Muslim movement because they have thoroughly infiltrated. The only thing that I regret in all of this is that two black groups have to fight and kill each other off. Elijah Muhammad could stop the whole thing tomorrow just by raising his hand. Really, he could. He could stop the whole thing by raising his hand. But he won't. He doesn't love black people. He doesn't even love his own followers. Proof of which they're killing each other. They killed one in the Bronx. They shot another one in the Bronx. They tried to get 6 of us Sunday morning. And the pattern has developed across the country. The man has gone insane. Absolutely out of his mind. Besides, you can't be 70 years old and surround yourself by a handful of 16, 17, 18-year-old girls and keep your right mind. You can't do it.
My name is Gene Roberts, and I was assigned by the New York City Police Department to infiltrate Malcolm's organization, report back membership, names, weapons, if any, and I attended meetings and was part of the security on occasions. And at this particular meeting, I was standing up front along with about 4 or 5 other guys, other members, and I heard a commotion in the middle to my right. I started for the commotion, and I see this young fellow come down the middle aisle, and then slip into about the 2nd or 3rd row and take a seat. And he was wearing blue suit, white shirt, and red tie, which is basically uniform for the members of the Nation of Islam. So after the meeting, I reported back to the department that I felt I had just saw a dry run on Malcolm's life. And when that was going to go down, I wasn't sure.
Malcolm did not expect to live another week. he promised to reveal the names of those plotting his death at next Sunday's meeting at the Audubon Ballroom.
The night before, he had said he didn't think it would be a good idea for us to come to the Audubon. And then the next day, he called and said that we could come. And I was very happy, that I could go because I had not seen him in 24 hours.
When my mother received the call from my father for us to all get together and come down to the Audubon, I knew that was different. That was a rhythm change by that time with all of the things that were going on. And all the while, it was still an exciting venture to get ready and go see Daddy. And we got there, he was late, and we sat at a booth, stage right, downstage right.
Malcolm came in, and I escorted him from about the middle of the ballroom to the wings backstage. When I got there, I had noticed there were some people already present. And there was 3 people sitting on the first row. They were sitting there reading newspapers. Nobody's paying them any mind. And Malcolm was still in the back. Benjamin Goodman came out, and he opened up the meeting.
I opened up for him, and he had sat down behind me, and he said, "Make it plain." Make it plain is the code word that he used for us to bring him forward. So anyway, I did. I brought Minister Malcolm forward. He didn't like a lot of icing, here's Minister Malcolm the Great and all that. He didn't like that. Just plain,
Then I heard a lot of shots. And I looked up, and these 3 that were sitting across the front are now working their way from Malcolm's right to Malcolm's left, shooting at him.
I saw my husband falling back. He didn't bend, he just fell straight. And then I forgot my children. I tried to get to him.
I was facing the assassins, so I saw them stand up and take my father's life. An image that I wondered if I could have prevented it.
I was going to the Audubon that day, had gotten lazy, and had said simply, I'll go next week. And so proceeded to go into the kitchen, put some coffee on, turn on the radio. In my little apartment there, I had a little black and white kitchen table with these little black chairs, and I had this little black radio on that table, and I clicked the radio on as I stood there thinking about what had happened the night before, turned towards the stove to pick up my coffee. And the flash came through on this station and said Malcolm had been assassinated. And I froze. I remember turning in that kitchen and screaming.
I was in the home of Jewish family. And they said very casually that Malcolm X has been assassinated. Then someone said, after all, he was anti-Semitic, and I took exception to this, knowing full well he was not. Then I excused myself and I went into that bathroom and cried about 15 minutes.
There's nothing on earth will make me accept Malcolm's assassination. Nothing. As far as I'm concerned, it may sound a bit weird, but he's alive. Very much. And one day I'll get even. That's the way I go to bed every night.
Three members of the Nation of Islam were arrested and convicted of the murder. But the question of a larger conspiracy to silence Malcolm X was never explored.
Malcolm X said that the black Muslims were trying to kill him, and he was going to name those he thought would commit the crime yesterday before he was shot. Did you comment on that?
I don't know. I don't have any knowledge of anyone trying to kill Malcolm.
I wasn't remorseful. I wasn't sorry. For what? And as Mr. Muhammad said, he taught violence and he died violently. And he was a hypocrite. And I say that he was a Benedict Arnold.
The most honorable Elijah Muhammad.
The night before the funeral, the Nation of Islam held its annual Savior's Day convention in Chicago.
When I got the news that my brother Malcolm had been shot dead, and I was shocked. But I know that he was traveling on a very reckless and dangerous course. And if I was to say I was not shocked, I would be telling a lie.
So brothers and sisters, I appreciate these few minutes of speaking to you. Brother Malcolm is dead, and there's nothing we can do to bring him back. And we would be ignorant, with conditions as they are today for the so-called Negro, to get confused and go to fighting and arguing among ourselves and forget all about the one that caused us to be in this condition in the first place.
On the day of Malcolm's funeral, I was in the hotel room with my brother, and we were watching it, Filbert and I, and so we saw it on television. I didn't have, many thought I should have been there, but I had no intentions of being out there. When you knew the circumstances and the kind of people that you were dealing with, you had to do your own thinking, and there was no place for me at that time. You don't know what kind of nut sitting around there thinking that they're doing God's will and all this kind of stuff. And here's a member of his family. You don't know what they're liable to do. So for that reason, I wasn't there. And that's why I'm still here, I guess.
Of all the leaders that I knew and loved and admired and had walked with and walked behind, this one, as I said before, had been closest to me. I felt I was losing a son. So I thought that I would like my children and generations to come to know this most important aspect of Malcolm X. that he was indeed our manhood, our shining black prince who didn't hesitate to die because he loved us so. I thought that in honoring him, we honored the best in ourselves. When the funeral was over, and then the Muslims came and dressed him for proper Muslim burial. And after that, we went out to the cemetery. And when we got there, the professional grave diggers were standing there with their shovels, but some of the black brothers said, no, we can't let you do that. We dig this grave. We cover this brother with dirt. And I was proud at that moment to be black.
I don't think we ever got to be friends or ever could have. I think our respective skin colors and his view of this great division would have prevented that. But I think we did get to, we moved from a relationship in which these encounters were interviews to a relationship in which they were conversations. And even at my first encounter, I never felt, it's weird to say this, but I never took it personally. Even with my blue eyes, and even with him talking about the blue-eyed devil, I never took it personally. I knew I was part of the indicted group, but he had a way of making you feel comfortable, feel as if you were talking man to man.
I look at my watch, or I show up late somewhere, and I can hear Malcolm talking about not trusting a person who doesn't wear a watch and who is careless with time. And he first said that to me when I was 14 years old. And I hear it in my ear today like he's still there saying it.
Well, what is your ultimate aim? The only way the problem can be solved. First, the white man and the black man have to be able to sit down at the same table. The white man has to feel free to speak his mind without hurting the feelings of that Negro. And the so-called Negro has to feel free to speak his mind without hurting the feelings of the white man. Then they can bring the issues that are under the rug out on top of the table and take an intelligent approach to get the problem solved.
Do you consider yourself militant?
I consider myself Malcolm.